morning. My name's Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here. I have 3 kids, and we go back and forth to Raleigh kind of frequently. That's where my family still lives, and so, it's about a 2.5-hour drive to get there and back. And there is this question that my kids will ask whenever we go anywhere in the car for an extended period of time, and I'm not sure where they learned it. I don't know where they picked it up. I'm sure they're the only kids in the world that ask this question. It's, are we there yet? You heard this question? I think it's like embedded in their DNA. Like there's something about them that recognizes, oh, this is going to be a long drive. Are we there yet? And that question that they ask is just so regular we all ask that question. When we were growing up, we asked that question as well. My son, there was one time, just a few months ago, we were going up to Raleigh. He was engrossed in his tablet, right? We were running 10 minutes behind, which, as you know, already is just unacceptable. You understand, unacceptable. And so that unacceptable 10-minute delay kind of already set me off. But then we get in the car. He's focused on his tablet. My kids each have their own. Don't judge me. It's the 21st century. Just go with it, okay? We're doing the best we can. So he's in his tablet. We're finally on the road. We're moving along. Without even looking up, he says, "Are we there yet?" I take a deep breath. Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what they tell us to do. Take a deep breath. I said, "Son, please look out the window. We have not even left the neighborhood yet." That's a true story. So that question, are we there yet? That question, it irks us a little bit because we know that it's not really what they're saying. When they say, "Are we there yet?" that is the question. If that's all it was, we'd be okay with that because it's a simple yes or no. But that question is actually, I am bored. I want to get out of this car. Are we going to get there ever? This is the longest trip of my life, and I'm going to make the next 2.5 hours of everyone's life in this car miserable. That's what that question means when they ask that question, are we there yet? And kids get a bad rap for complaining. I understand. Kids, often we say, oh, they whine, they complain so much. But the truth is, guess where they learn it? From us, from adults. I know lots of adults who are really good at complaining, right? You do too. We all know lots of adults who are good at complaining. I married an adult who's really good at complaining. Oh, see, there it is. This crowd, you guys boo. I like that. You're the first ones. All right, yeah, okay. But here's the thing. She married me, and I am a bigger complainer than she is, 100%, all right? Yeah, I admit it. She puts up with a lot. So we were this week, I was asking her, I said, hey, Whit, what are some things that we complain about, just in life, that you feel like we complain about? Let's just pause and think about this, right? And as I asked that question, she is at the refrigerator. She's trying to put ice into a cup from our ice dispenser. And she says, "This ice maker. I hate this ice maker. I complain about this ice maker all the time." And that is true. We all do. Because here's the thing about this ice maker. It makes ice, and the ice that it makes clumps together, and it is larger than the hole through which it dispenses. And therefore, it gets jammed every single day. Every day. We try to get ice out of this machine, and beep, 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 beep. It stops working. You have to open the door. You try to get the ice out. As you're trying to get the ice out with your hand, it falls through the dispenser onto the floor and shatters like glass everywhere. And now there is ice all over the floor. This happens every single day of our lives. Kid you not. So I take a deep breath, because that's what we're supposed to do, and I say, well, that's what you complain about. But can you think of an example of something that I complain about? And without skipping a beat, she goes, just one? You want just one example? The truth is, we complain about stuff, don't we? We all have our things that we complain about. You probably have, as I'm saying that, you have your things that you complain about in your life, in your world, at home, at work, something that bothers you, and it's just like in you to complain about it. It's just kind of there. And you know if it would get fixed, you hope it gets fixed. One day it might work itself, whatever, but it's there, and you complain about it. For some of us, it's people. There might be a person in your life that you're like, oh, I don't want to go to that family thing because Uncle Joe's going to be there, and this is going to be this whole thing. And so you're like, I don't want to be there around those people, or they call or they text, and you're just like, I can't spend time with these people. I had a friend like that in college. I realized really quick we could not go out to eat because she would complain about every single thing that came to the table, like that she ordered. And I said, what is wrong with it? She's like, well, actually, I just don't want to pay full price for anything, so I always find something to complain about. I was like, what? Stopped going out with that person. Done. So we all have our things that we complain about. And it's just kind of in us. It's in our society. It's systemic in us that we complain. This is why we complain about traffic, right? Everybody, oh, the traffic this morning. The traffic is bad in the summer. Like, we complain about traffic. And then they start building new roads or expanding roads to help with the traffic. And then what do? We complain about the construction on these roads. It's never going to be done. We complain about weather. It's too hot. It's too cold. You realize that there are stores and businesses that have entire departments dedicated to people complaining. They can't deal with it, so they pay people to go through training, right, like counseling, to be able to deal with your problems, your complaining issues. They have complaint departments. There's even a department of the government designed completely to field complaints from consumers about the stores when their department fails. There's even departments in the government to complain to about the government. That's this whole thing, all right? We are just built into complaining. We love to complain. It's just something that's in us. Nobody has to teach us. We just do it. Before we go further, I think it's important we understand and have a common ground for the definition of complaining. Old Merriam-Webster says it this way: complain is simply to express grief, pain, or discontent. I would also add discomfort to that. We are very quick to complain about things that cause us discomfort. When we have an unmet expectation, we complain about it, don't we? Now, I want to be really clear. It's not just pointing out that something is incorrect. That's not really complaining. Complaining crosses a different line. For example, last year, my wife and I, we bought a new comforter for our bed. We needed to change things up, so we got a new comforter. It was great. We were really excited. We open it up, and what do we see? There is a stain on it. Someone purchased it, ruined it, and returned it to the store, and the people at the store put it back on the shelf. Okay, in this moment, what are we going to do? So we take it back to the store. Now that, simply saying, hey, there's a stain on this, can we get an exchange or a refund? That's not complaining. The complaint would be, I can't believe that you guys didn't check this before you put it back on the shelf. I can't believe that I had to drive all the way home, and then I realized that I was inconvenienced. I had to drive all the way back here, and now I have to stand in this ridiculous line, all because that's complaining, right? Big difference. When I express it, that's the key word in that definition, to express it. I can think it, but when I start expressing it, when I start telling other people about it, when I express how it discomforts me or how it bothers me, inconveniences me, that is complaining. There's a little bit of self involved in that complaining. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's not me. I don't do that. That's not me. You're looking at your spouse. You're like, this is for you. This is pay attention. That's what you're thinking right now. But the truth is, and this is a great quote. I had to share it with you guys. This is a quote I read this week because I was reading about complaining. Complaining is like bad breath. We notice it when it comes out of someone else's mouth, but not when it comes out of our own. Fact, right? We are very quick to notice when other people are complaining. We all have that friend, oh, they complain all the time about everything. But the truth is, you do too. We complain about stuff. In fact, we compete with one another in our complaining. If you're married, you know this. You come home from work, I had a really hard day. Oh, you had a hard day. Let me tell you about my day. What do you mean your hard day? All you had to do was take a comforter back to the store because it had a stain on it. That's not difficult, right? We complain about our hard day. Who had the worst day? Who had the harder time at work? Who was up more in the middle of the night with kids, right? Who took care of the kid the last time they threw up all over the floor? Like we complain in competition with one another. We all have our things that we complain about. And here's what I think. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at this idea of what happens when we find ourselves in situations, when we find ourselves on this journey of life and we allow these ideas and things to kind of creep in. What do we sacrifice? What does it cost us in our relationship with God, in our relationship with one another, in our relationship with people when we start down that path? What are we missing out on? And we're going to look at this through the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. He promised them a land, but then hundreds of years go by. They find themselves in slavery for 400 years, and then God appoints a man named Moses to lead them to the promised land. That was their destiny hundreds of years before. And so through an amazing set of miracles and circumstances, and God showing up in truly extraordinary ways to prove himself to his people, and you can read all about that in Exodus, God then leads his people out of captivity, out of slavery, and he is about to journey into the promised land, lead them into this amazing place. And they find themselves in this weird crossroads at the very beginning. Like as soon as they start their journey, they're up against a lot. So they have in front of them an ocean, the Red Sea, right in front of them, right? The entire nation. And behind them is an army, Pharaoh's army. He's changed his mind. No longer does he want them to leave. He wants to capture them all back and bring them back to himself. And so right out the gate, they are faced with this obstacle. And here's what happens in Exodus chapter 14. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, just leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Now, that is true. They did complain about it already. And now they are actually out of Egypt, and now they are standing in this situation. And what is their response? They complain straight away. You would think after being in slavery for 400 years to have this taste of freedom that they would not complain after seeing God do all that he did through these amazing miracles, that they would have nothing but utmost trust and love and devotion for the God that has rescued them. But instead, all they see is an ocean in front of them, an army behind them, and all they can do is complain about it. Now, you may be familiar with the story. Moses raises his staff, does exactly as God instructs him. The water parts, and the entire nation of Israel marches across on dry land while God is actually shielding them from Pharaoh's army. They get all the way across. The army starts going in, and then the waves come back crashing over the army, and the people are free again. Amazing. You would think, can you imagine what that must have been like? And what's great about that is that from that point forward, God's people trusted him no matter what, and they never complained again. That's not true. It only took a couple of days. If we take a look, Exodus chapter 15, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. So now they're in the desert. For 3 days, they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah, bitter. So the people grumbled, complaining against Moses. What are we to drink? What are we going to do, Moses, right? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. What? That's incredible. Wandering on for 3 days, not finding water. They finally find water. It's disgusting. And then God uses Moses. Moses is obedient, and then all of a sudden, they can drink it. It's amazing. The best water ever, right? And from that point forward, God's people never complained again. But that's not true. Because just like a few months later, look what happens here. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." They were complaining they had no food to eat. And what does God do? You can read, he does this amazing thing where he gives them manna. It's bread that's on the ground every single day. It's like cornflakes. It's like a Special K diet that's just there for them every single day. For the next 40 years, it's going to be every day he provides for them. All they have to do is walk outside and pick it up, and they have what they need. And God's people were so thankful for that. They never complained again. Are you tired of their complaining? I am. One more, though. Exodus chapter 17. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. Here again. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me." And God said, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled, because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" And here again, God provides for his people. But again and again and again, they complain and they complain and they complain. When I read this account, I'm just thinking to myself, man, what is the deal? Why do they complain so much? Clearly they have some sort of problem. If that was me, I would not be complaining like that. Right? Because we've seen God work. He's rescued us out of slavery. We've seen God work. He literally parted an ocean in front of us. He destroyed our enemy in one fell swoop. He turned bitter water into amazing water. He gives us bread every single day from the ground. And here we are again, and we're still thirsty. And yeah, I know God will take care of it because he's always taken care of it. Wouldn't that be my response? No. I don't think it would be. You might be asking, well, couldn't they see that? And the answer is no, they couldn't see it. I wouldn't see it either. You know how I know? Because I'm a complainer. You are too. We know what this is like. There's been a lot of research done over the last 20 years about our brains. It's fascinating. It fascinates me. I've been reading a lot over the last several months about our brains, how they're wired and everything. And one thing that's really interesting is that when we encounter new things, like a stressful situation, like that fight or flight response, you remember that, learning about that in science class a long time ago? That kicks into gear. And sometimes we only think of it when we're threatened by something, right? But it actually kicks in all the time. Whenever we encounter any kind of stressful situation, right? It kicks into play. And what happens is how we respond to that actually creates a new neural pathway in our brain. So if I was just to throw out a very hypothetical, not true circumstance, like let's say that I have to leave my house at 6:55 every morning in order to get my kids to school so that I can then go to the gym and get to work on time. This is all hypothetical, not based in any reality, everyday life situation that I experience every single day of my life, right? Trying to get my kids in the car at 6:55 in the morning. So let's just say that that's the goal. And let's say that if I'm thrown off by a few minutes, my whole day is going to be messed up, right? My whole day is just going to be in shatters. All right, so 6:55 comes, and we're still not in the car. What am I going to do in that moment? What do you do in that moment? What are dads known for doing in that moment? Get in the car. Let's go. We're going to be late. We have to go. You should have thought of that beforehand. You can't go back inside and get that. You need to pack your book bag the night before, right? immediately I start complaining. That's a complaint. Yeah, I am now inconvenienced, so I am complaining. What happens in my brain is that I've encountered this situation, my response is to complain, and now that new neural pathway is formed in my brain. So the next day, when I'm still not in my car at 6:55 in the morning, guess what I am going to do? My brain's going to remember, oh, in this situation, we complain. And that's what I'm going to do again. In fact, every time I do that, that bridge gets stronger and stronger and stronger in my brain. And so I am basically wiring my brain that in this situation, when I experience this, I'm going to complain about it. And you know this to be true, whether it's an ice maker or trying to get in the car on time or traffic, whatever it might be, we are wiring ourselves to complain about it because that's what we do in this situation. In other words, the more that I complain, the more I will complain. Complaining actually compounds exponentially. The more that I complain about it, the more likely I am to complain. It just builds a stronger and stronger connection in my brain. The more I complain, the more likely I'm going to complain the next time, whether it's standing in a grocery line. Oh, the line is so long. Guess what? Next week, oh, this line, it's always long. Or we go to a restaurant, they mess up our food. Oh, they always mess it up. We're just naturally, it's going to be our wiring. We're wiring ourselves to complain, and we're building that bridge stronger and stronger. Remember, it is expressing it. It's not just thinking it, we're expressing it. So what do we do when we express a complaint? We usually talk about it, right? We talk about it out loud. Might be to someone, might be on social media, some of us, right? We start complaining. And here's what happens when we relay that complaint to somebody else. Do you know what happens in our bodies? That same stress that we felt in that situation, it comes back to life again. We actually relive that event when we tell somebody else about it. That means that my blood pressure starts to go up. I start getting agitated. My body starts getting tense. You've done this before, right? Something changes at work. You're complaining about an employee. You're complaining about a coworker. And I can't believe what they did. You'll never guess what they did to me. And you start telling somebody else, and you immediately start getting tense. You feel it, right? You're breathing heavy, all of that. We're reliving it again and again. You know what happens when we do that? We're making it stronger again because we're just doing it all over again. And now that bridge is like a super highway that we're just jumping onto, and we're going to be more likely to complain even more the next time. The other thing that happens when we start expressing our complaints is it becomes communal. And you know this. You complain about something, and it's like the Hoover Dam breaks, and everybody's complaining about it, right? This happened to me a few months ago. I go to the Y over here, and guess what they did? You will not believe it. They changed the layout of the equipment. Didn't tell anybody, didn't ask anybody, they just changed it. I thought it was great. I walked in, I was like, oh, this is so much better. I have so much more room. This is wonderful. I love it. And then, as soon as I say that to somebody else comes behind me. I can't believe they changed all this. I can't find anything. My whole routine's messed up. Right? They start complaining about it. And then somebody else says, yeah, I can't believe they need to put it back the way it was, right? Immediately, just like that. Why? Because complaining is communal. Because we're social creatures. We like to complain. When we complain, we want to make sure that we are being agreed with. We saw this on display throughout the pandemic, didn't we? That's why we were so polarized about so many different things, about arrows on grocery store aisles. We're judging. I can't believe they're not obeying the arrow on the floor. Complain about that. Complain about so many things. And it's communal. We invite other people to complain along with us. Here's another thing that happens. Complaining rewrites history. You know this? Oh, man, if we had just left 5 minutes earlier, this wouldn't have happened. If you had just packed your bag on time, this wouldn't have happened, right? Here's what we start doing. I wrote it down this way, and I had to share it with you because I wouldn't remember it. We start comparing present circumstances to past potential future outcomes. We should have, would have, could have. And if it hadn't happened that way, then this would have been the result. We have no evidence for that whatsoever. But that's what we believe. That's what we tell ourselves. We start rewriting history, that things would have been or could have been better than they actually are. Another thing that happens when we complain is we limit possibility. This is really interesting. There's been a lot of research done about this, and I just have to share this quote from a biologist with you. When our brains marinate in a stew of adrenaline and cortisol, when we relive complaining, when we relive stressful moments again and again, it causes shrinkage to the hippocampus. That's a fun word to say. A part of the brain involved in learning, memory, and judgment. Basically, complaining shrinks your brain. And the part of your brain that is used for finding new solutions, for thinking about problems and coming to a good resolution, for experiencing and learning new things, it begins to shrink, and you are less likely to see the possibility of a better outcome the more you complain. Interesting, isn't it? So, to recap, complaining compounds exponentially, recalls the same trauma, becomes communal, rewrites history, limits possibility. When I think of the nation of Israel in this moment and their constant routine of complaining, I see all of these. Don't you? Somebody starts complaining and then the whole nation is grumbling. They complain about the same things. Even though they've seen a good result, they still complain about the same things. Everybody's doing it. Everybody starts complaining. Rewrite history. It would have been better if we had just stayed in Egypt. It would have been better for us if we had just died there. It would have been better as slaves. Limits possibility. God can bring us water from a rock, but we can't see it. You know that things change around us all the time at work? There could be a change in policy or something. It could be better, could be good. But because we're so wired to complain, we won't admit it, we can't see it. We'll just complain about it, even if it's better. It happens in church. I know that's hard to believe. Sometimes something changes. We start complaining about it. Even though it's better, we're going to complain. Why? Because that's how we've been wired to do everything else around here. We complain. In our world, in our communities, that's why we complain about construction. It's better, we're going to complain about it. We can't see possibility when we complain. We can't see what could be. And here is God trying to lead his people to see what could be. But after 400 years of complaining, because nobody's like joyfully being a slave in Egypt. So you know for 400 years it's been complaining, one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. Complaining. God promised us something. Yeah, he hasn't shown up yet. God promised us something. Yeah, when is it ever going to happen? That promised land is never happening. And then Moses shows up. Oh, that can't be true. Oh, you parted the Red Sea. This can't be real. Oh, you gave us water. That can't be right. You gave us bread on the ground, water from a rock. Impossible. And so as a result, after all of that complaining, God says, we need some time. And he allows them to wander for 40 years in the wilderness so that they can build trust with him and hopefully see that they need to rewrite that mindset. Now, what's interesting about complaining is well, what do we do with that? How do we stop complaining? How do we get out of this? And what's interesting is that in all this research, what it does to us and all these negative effects, they basically will just say, well, what you should do is you should really just not complain. Okay, cool, easy. And then also you should just take a deep breath. Okay, great. And then also what you should do is actually start being thankful for stuff. That's what they tell you. And I think to myself, all right, as a follower of Jesus, that sounds vaguely familiar. And I think of Paul. And you think of Paul, who encountered so many obstacles, right? He was serving Jesus. He was doing exactly what he should do. He was thrown in prison, shipwrecked numerous times, beaten a lot, and yet he didn't complain. And you know what he said? This is what he said in 1 Thessalonians. Rejoice always. If I'm rejoicing, I'm not complaining. Right? Pray continually. Some might say take a deep breath. As a follower of Jesus, that sounds a lot better to me. I'm going to pray. Give thanks in all circumstances. For why? This is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus in this room, you understand that it's not just like good behavior we're talking about. We're not talking about just being polite. We're talking about that Jesus, if you're his follower and you've committed your life to him, he has given you the Holy Spirit, and it is the call of God on your life to live this way. That means that Christians, followers of Jesus, you should be the least complaining people on planet Earth. That's our calling. Because our hope isn't here. Our grumbling shouldn't be of this world. It's not who we are. So, what should we do? Well, first, we stop complaining. We rejoice always. We stop complaining. You say, oh, that's easier said than done. I know. Believe me, I know. Because I've recognized over this past week in preparing this how much I complain. Little things, insignificant things. But again, I'm expressing it. I'm saying it out loud. I'm not just thinking it, I'm expressing it. I'm saying it to someone. I'm venting, we like to say. I need to stop complaining. Second thing, I got to pray. You mean if there's a traffic jam, I should pray about the traffic? No. You should pray about your heart. You should pray about your response. You should pray and recognize that there are other people in this story that are not you at all. Pray. Spend some time with God. Why not? You're in traffic. Use it. Last thing, express gratitude. That's what Paul said. Express gratitude. Don't just think it. Don't just think it. You have to express it. We're very quick to express our complaints, aren't we? Even when we're in the car by ourselves, oh, I can't believe this person cut me off. We'll say it out loud to nobody. Very rarely, if ever, do we say, I am so thankful this guy used his blinker. Man, thank you. Thank you for using your blinker. We don't say that out loud. We don't take the time to express gratitude. Here's what's interesting. This research is fairly new. When we express gratitude, something different happens. When we express gratitude, you know what happens? That bridge we've built of complaining, it's like taking a sledgehammer to it. And when we do that, we're actually rewiring our brains to express gratitude. So, going back to the highly theoretical example of me trying to leave my house on time in the morning with 2 kids, taking them to school, instead of saying, oh, come on, let's go, we got to get in the car, what if instead I say, man, I am so thankful for my kids. They are crazy. I love them. I'm thankful that I get an extra 3 minutes to be at home with them today. What if I start expressing gratitude instead? And I rewire my brain. That is a much stronger, and that is what changes things. That changes my relationship with God. That changes my relationship with his people, with this world. That's what we're called to do. Listen, if you're a follower of Jesus, then this is different. If you're a follower of Jesus, you understand you have the Holy Spirit inside of you to help you do this. If you're not a follower of Jesus, then this is just a really good pep talk. So it's still good. But if you're a follower of Jesus, this is what you're called to. It's a higher standard. It's a way to live, not just so that it benefits us. It's a way to live so that we are available for people in this world. So that we're available to share gratitude and love and joy with other people. And we can't do that because complaining strangles joy. So that's our calling. To see the possibility that God is at work all around us, to see the joy that can come from just following him and trusting him. In just a few moments, our band's going to come out. They're going to sing a song. And you can join in and sing, or you can just absorb it. And I hope that the words are something that we carry with us this week. And here's the thing. They say it's about 21 days to change a habit. So what would it be like if we didn't complain for 21 days? You say, that's really hard. I know. I've been trying for 3 days. I've had to start over 3 times. It's hard. But I'm aware and I'm trying. I don't want to be the guy that complains all. I don't want to be known as that. I don't want my kids to look, oh, he complains all the time. No, I don't want that. So what would it be like if we didn't complain for 21 days? What would it be like if we expressed gratitude instead? What would we look like? What kind of community would you have at work? What kind of community would you have at school? What kind of community would you have on the streets as you're going in your home? What would it look like to not complain for 21 days? It took God's people 40 years, and even then, they didn't quite get it. I don't want to wait 40 years to learn that. Band's going to come. They're going to sing for us. You can join in, but I hope that you carry this. Whenever you feel that urge to complain, to remember his promise. Will you pray with me? God, thank you for this message. God, thank you for the message for me, what it's done in my life. God, I ask that you would activate your Spirit in us, that it would be amplified loudly this week. God, that when we feel that urge to jump on that bridge and to jump on that highway of complaining, it's so easy. But it's so much easier to trust you in your Spirit. It's so much easier just to obey you. It's so much easier to stop complaining and rejoice, to pray, to express gratitude. God, help us to live like the people you've called us to be, to have the mind of Christ, to take every thought captive. God, would you help us to live different? That's what you've called us to do. And as we look ahead in the next few weeks and we see just how you always provide, how you're always there, don't let us limit the possibility. Don't let us be closed off to what you can do in us and through us and around us. Jesus, we love you and we worship you. It's in his name we pray. Amen.